Hey, everybody, it's Paul.
And it's Nora.
And we're here to say thank you because this is the end of season 1. Oh.
Womp womp.
But we'll be back with season 2 before you know it. And we'll have some format changes and plenty of the stuff that you've already grown used to and like.
And also, we just want to thank you for tuning into season 1 and for the feedback that we've been getting. It's been pretty spectacular. So we want to thank you for tuning into us because we know you can tune into other people.
Yeah, great amount of support that we've gotten from season 1 and a lot of feedback and a lot of great questions, some of which we'll be handling in season 2. So that's amazing. Keep them coming. And remember, as always, as we go into this episode, we are not mental health professionals and we are not qualified to provide therapeutic advice or courses of treatment. We are just two people who are trying to do better and feel better in their lives, just like you. And now, on with the show.
What's up, Lizard Lip?
What's up, Shamalama Ding Dong? How are you?
Good. Calling about pre-production.
I'm calling about pre-production. Yeah, it's your topic. What do you want to talk about?
I was thinking about this. What do you think about resume living versus eulogy living?
Resume living versus eulogy living. I love it. It's such a coincidence. I was just writing your eulogy before I called you.
Oh, what? Does it start with "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to do this thing called life"?
No. Here, you want to hear a part of it? Here it is.
Well, I guess so.
We're gathered here today to honor the memory of Nora McMahon. What she lacked in social graces, she more than made up for in gaseous output. What do you think?
Well, in my deathbed, I hope everyone is thinking about my farts.
Absolutely. I don't think, or your belches, one or the other. But yeah, it'll be there. But anyway, in all seriousness, I love the topic. I think we should do it. It's going to be great, and I'll see you in the studio on Thursday. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, as Prince would say, let's go crazy.
Let's go crazy. See you
all
then.
Right.
Bye.
Stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
Have you ever stopped to take stock of your life, looked around, and then thought about how utterly insane it is that so many of us keep ourselves busy, distracted, or entertained without contemplating what we really want to experience in this absolute gift we call life?
Have you ever attained one of your big goals only to find yourself feeling just as empty as when you started? Or have you ever asked yourself the question, is that all there is?
Today on the show, we're talking about the differences between resume living and eulogy living. The former being more focused on professional achievements and goals, and the latter being concerned with experiences, relationships, and how we move through the world. In this episode, we'll be diving into the upsides and downsides of each. In the end, we'll land on a strategy that integrates the two in a way that lets you retain your ambitions, while still paying attention to and nurturing all the other important areas of your life. So if you're ready for takeoff,
let's go.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same.
Okay, Nora, we are tackling resume versus eulogy living today, which I think is an excellent comparison to make. But what made you want to cover this topic?
Well, I've been working my ass off for all my adult life, and the more I contemplate death, the more I think we've got it all twisted in our culture.
So this is going to be a cheery episode, is that what you're saying?
Yes, always. I always got to bring the cancer and the death in. Anyway, many of us, at least here in the US, we make most of our adult lives revolve around work accomplishments and climbing corporate ladders and job titles. And we do that without sitting with the reality of how much of that limited energy gets redirected away from our families, friends, communities, creative endeavors, and fulfilling experiences in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember reading that a lot of hospice nurses report that a good amount of dying people's deepest regrets revolve around spending their lives working too much.
Yeah, like almost all of them, I believe. I've read that too. Yeah.
Like no one's like, I wish I worked more.
No,
on their deathbed. I know that our systems here in the U.S. at least create a lot of insecurity around having or making enough money to cover our retirements, the mortgages, our children's education, healthcare, and all of that jazz. But I think we can get more creative and figure out the ways to integrate more fulfilling relationships and experiences with our grind culture. Mm-hmm. So we all have to work to live, but do we really need to live only to work is really the question I ask.
Yeah. Oh man, I hear that. All those things. Yes to all that. It's funny. I think I turned a real corner toward eulogy living after my last real job, and then really committed to it after my dad died. Often there's an inciting incident in midlife of some sort that makes you step back and take stock of things and how they're going. And, after those two things happened, many of the goals that I had previously they just kind of fell apart and seemed unimportant in the grand scheme of things, right? It was a shock to my system. And then, living and gratitude and intimacy and love and peace in my life, more peace, they all moved to the front of the line, and having more of those things became the only goal that seemed to make sense anymore. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone in that. At least in my case, you're not alone. I'm here with that.
Yeah.
But I turned the same corner during my diagnosis. Here we
Mhm.
go again.
Yeah.
And then later with the deaths of my in-laws and like different friends that I had that died too young. And then again with my dad's death as well. So yeah, you're not alone with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks in midlife come to a similar crossroads, and then they either do one of two things. They either throw themselves into their work, right, and try to stuff all that, and not think about it, and do the thing that just involves them to distract them, or they do a 180 and really contemplate what they want and reassess how they want to live the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, let's define our terms for the listeners here so they can get a grip on what we're talking about. You want to hit us with the definition for what you think resume and eulogy living are? Eulogy?
Yeah, sure. We'll cover that. So, resume living, the perspective that I believe most of us get caught up in is living from the mindset that hopscotching from career accomplishment to career accomplishment will somehow fulfill us over the long term, right? And on the other hand, eulogy living comes from the perspective that fulfillment stems from the quality of our relationships, our creative endeavors, and meaningful connected experiences.
Yeah.
So those are the differences.
Yeah. And for me, resume living can go beyond just work, right? It can be about your social resume as well, right? You develop a certain set of skills to get a job, to buy the sports car, to get the trophy wife, to buy the house, to join the country club, or whatever. It's all just ticking boxes so you feel comparatively like you're successful. And so that others see that too, that's what drives a lot of people is looking the part, but how many times have you seen people who have worked very hard to get those things and they still look unhappy, or them and they are unhappy?
I mean, all you got to do is look around, really.
That's right.
Yeah, some of us belong to the lucky few who have had both the fortune and the insight to be able to choose a career path that feels like a vocation, right? And that's like the life's work that's fulfilling to one's nature. It's like using your gifts to serve people. But many of us are on a career path that seems to have chosen us.
I've been there, yeah.
And it demands more and more of our time and energy to meet our basic needs for survivals and standards for comfort for quite a lot of people. So I get why people act out a resume mindset. The achievements, though, are mostly empty without integrating the eulogy qualities that we'll get to in a moment. I think the point is differentiating these two views. The point of differentiating those two views is to empower ourselves with the opportunities to get clear about our values and virtues, which I think most people don't really think about, and so that we can lead the types of lives that foster connection and growth, and whether that's in the context of our career paths or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think people think about it a lot. I think a lot of people sleepwalk through life and just hope that nothing else bad is going to happen around the corner. I mean, I've lived like that before. It depends on what mindset you're in, and where you are in your development, how old you are. There's a lot of things that go into that. But I think for most people, they can reach a happy medium here. It's not about giving up your ambitions and your goals. It's more about how you relate to them and how much space they take up in your life. Those two things, if you can shift those two things, you can get to a more balanced point with this stuff.
Yeah. We talk a lot about work-life balance here in the States. And I have to say that I don't love that term.
I don't either. I don't
like the balance.
Yeah.
When I think of balance, I think about a teeter-totter, or like someone walking a tightrope
that has to, or something.
Yeah, exactly. They have to try to balance everything under a lot of pressure, or else they're going to fall off, So I don't love that. But I do like the idea of work-life harmony. And, I think I think of it like mixing music on a soundboard, for harmony. And like at any era of your life, you can turn down the bass or turn up the treble.
Yeah.
And it's like a constant fine tuning to make everything cohesive and harmonious.
Yeah. This part of my life
like
needs more drums, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And like those things change at different eras of your life of what you need more of or less of.
Yeah.
And so it's like, instead of just trying to like,
just like music does with rhythm and dynamics and all the things that go into and keys and all that goes into that. Yeah, those are all, you pay attention to all those things and you can.
I'm a music nerd, so it hits right in the heart.
So
I think it's beneficial to have both the resume virtues, which is like focusing on developing the skills and what to bring to the marketplace, which is still important in our society. You gotta make money, you gotta eat.
Yep.
And it's, when you mix that with the eulogy virtues, which is focusing on the values and experiences and relationships and passion projects that you want to have developed in your lifetime. I believe that many of us miss the daily opportunities to think about our eulogy virtues because the death or denying culture that we exist in. Right?
No question about that. Yeah. We are terrified of death in this country, and that causes all kinds of problems in our day to day. Not the least of which is that we spend our precious time doing the most ridiculous stuff, not because we actually want to, but because we think we should, or worse yet, because somebody told us we should and we believed them, right, at face value. So we follow our conditioning and society's expectations for us without ever stopping to ask why. We shoot for the big prize they told us about, and then when we finally get it, we see it's made of smoke, and we feel as empty as we did before we achieved it. So let's talk some more about eulogy living and how contemplating the ends of our lives can bring us to a more immediate present and get us out of the scary area of this. It's not meant to be scary. It's just meant to be a meditation.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. First, we know that contemplating death can feel extremely scary and overwhelming for most people.
Yeah.
Most of us try to avoid that. I get it. But it can also be extremely empowering and offer a perspective that will prioritize your values and become a North Star to how you live your life from presence and intention. I find that there are a few cultures that I gravitate towards because death is just accepted as part of the life. It's just like we can't understand light without dark, right? If you live consistently in light and you don't know what dark is, you don't get to appreciate light.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can really fully understand life without contemplating death. So like I love New Orleans, Louisiana, like many people do, for this reason, because you walk around that city and there's just like it almost feels like Day of the Dead.
It's mixed everywhere in that town.
It's mixed everywhere. The skeletons, that's part of the voodoo culture, all that. It recognizes that death is a part of life in the same way that Day of the Dead does, where you get to contemplate your life and the lives of your loved ones who've passed on. And that's also a great way to sit and contemplate and decide how you want to carry their virtues and their values with us while we're here, right? So it's like how they lived through us.
Yeah.
It's kind of honoring them,
Yeah.
If you've ever dabbled in the Stoicism movement, if you know anything about that, you might recognize the phrase memento mori, which is Latin for remember you must die.
I have a tattoo that says that very thing.
Hey, look at that. Yeah. That's cool. In the Stoic philosopher, I can't speak. The Stoic philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, wrote in Meditations, he wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. It's a call to define and live from your virtues in the present, not to put off what your authentic self wants to do and say and think," right? I think a lot of us live under the illusion that we have more time than we actually do. And we tend to shelve what's in our hearts. It's like we shelve our deepest desires. We shelve the words that we want to communicate to those people we love, thinking that we'll have other opportunities. And, that's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
And it takes courage to contemplate how we want to think about our lives.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Anyway, the perspective, what I refer to as eulogy living life from experiences and virtues we want to leave as our legacy after we've departed from this life.
Yeah, that time thing is what you said really hit me. It's like the Buddha is quoted as saying, the problem is you think you have time. And the bigger problem is that if you're lucky enough to grow old, your perception of time speeds up and the days and weeks and months and years just start to fly by. I know it's happening to me.
Yep.
And so it seems you have even less time than you do,
Yeah. So one of the things I remember talking to my dad about this when he was alive, he was aging, and we were talking about like how as you get older, exactly like you said, it's just like you're like, oh wait, where's the time going? And I said it's kind of like life feels like a roll of toilet paper. And when you're young,
of course, that's your analogy. Of course,
of course
it is. Yeah.
I am who I am.
Yes.
But it's just like, you're sitting on the can, you look over and there's like a full roll of toilet paper at the beginning of the week, and the end of the week, it's like, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
gotta make do with what I got left.
And you don't know where it went. Yeah. I mean, you do know, exactly. But you don't know. You do. Yeah, exactly.
You flushed it down the toilet? I don't know.
That. Well, so funny. Well, taking it back to out of the bathroom and back to a philosophical point.
As only we can do.
The Buddhist tradition actually has a practice called Maranasati, which means mindfulness of death or death awareness. Was that?
I said Gesundheit.
Thank you. Anyway, the point is to remember with this is to remember, just like memento mori, is to remember that we can die at any time, and to align our actions with that fact. It adds an urgency to our practice a little bit. And similarly, eulogy living doesn't dwell on death in a morbid or sad way, but looks at our finite time as a motivator to do, say, and feel the things that we desperately want to do, say, and feel. And so, Nora, how do we move closer to that? How do we move closer to the eulogy mindset?
Ooh, here's where the
rubber hits the road.
Exactly. Yes. Well, I think we start by looking backward from where we are now. When we look back on our lives, it allows us the opportunity to think about the relationships that are most important to us.
Yeah.
If you had the option of who surrounds you while you're on your deathbed, who would those people be, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to write your own eulogy, reflecting on the type of life you would be proud of, how would that read? And what would be the experiences that were most important in shaping you? What's the legacy you want to pass on? What's your personal truth that you want to share? I always talk about Wayne Dyer and a lot of the stuff that
your buddy Wayne,
my
your best friend Wayne. Yeah.
He used to, in a lot of like the motivational speeches he gave, he used to say, "Don't die with your music still in you," and that always like really hit me.
Man,
this is why I love him. He's so full of wisdom.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, he lived from eulogy living. So I think of that, writing your own eulogy, while it might sound like kind of morbid, I think it's a great start in identifying the direction you actually want to take your life. It gives you the opportunity to allow you to live in the present with intention, with clarity and better focus.
Yeah, for sure. And those are all good questions that you mentioned there. I ask myself those things a lot, and I'll just add that you're thinking about your eulogy doesn't have to be 100% true in the moment.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Some of it can be aspirational. You can engage in manifesting qualities you want to be remembered for before you actually possess them. It's just an exercise so you can get more clarity about who you want to be and what you want to do with whatever time you have left here. And you want to think about the things that support that, whether they're currently true or not. The important part is that you spend some time going inside yourself and really meditating on what you want with your life to look like, and not in terms of money and possessions, but in terms of experience and feeling of it, and in terms of how it feels for you to move through the world and what can be different with that, if anything.
Yeah. The contemplation part of it requires us we got to dive deeper in our inner worlds, just so we can determine what we want for ourselves, right? I would argue that in order for our external worlds to reflect what we truly desire, going deeper in our inner world is like, we got to do that to take stock of what we need to heal and change in ourselves, which is one of the biggest ways to affect our exterior worlds, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, no question. As within, so without, right? I mean, as with so many things we talk about on the podcast, eulogy living requires that we quell the inner turmoil and, the limiting beliefs that we carry around so we can see more clearly what truly matters to us. And there's really no change that can happen in our external experience before we work on our internal experience. It's just that way. And it's with every single thing we've talked about so far. Yep. And I know we talk about EMDR therapy a lot because we're both in it. But it really has been instrumental, along with, meditation and psychedelics, in allowing me to change my inner landscape. And having said that, I also want to mention that it's a process. Like, very few people wake up one morning and feel transformed. So most of us have a lot of conditioning and trauma and guilt to deal with before the smoke clears and we can really see what's what. So this thing takes courage, and it also takes patience. So even for thinking about this stuff, pat yourself on the back, because most people will not do it.
Right. And it's a continuous cycle of learning and unlearning, like all of life is to me. It's like you learn some stuff and you have to unlearn some stuff until you're dead, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you're never
absolutely.
done with that, is my point.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Yeah,
it's
very
constantly
good.
evolving.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so how do we cultivate more eulogy living practices, and how do we integrate them into our resume living lives if we really aren't doing that already?
I think about this a lot, and I came up with a few kind of bullet points that you'll have to like bear with me
I love a
here.
bullet point, Nora. Hit
Yeah,
us.
it's kind of like these are the things that I thought about of like how to integrate eulogy living.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first I came up with some questions, as I always have with questions, but the first question is, are there any relationships that you're involved in where if the other person suddenly passed, or even if you did, that you would regret not saying how you truly felt? Like, do they know how you feel about them,
I
and
mean,
vice
who
versa?
doesn't have one of those? I mean, if you don't have any of those
Mhm.
people in your life, congratulations, man.
Yeah, yeah, and so, like,
It's hard to get clear with everybody in your life like that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And, do any of those relationships need tending and mending, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta identify those relationships and then reach out to people. You gotta have that courage.
Yeah.
You might not end up getting the result you want from other people, but at least you can live on with the satisfaction of knowing that you're trying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, at least there's that instead of just, just kinda being like, "Well," shrug your shoulders and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say that if the relationship that you need to tend to and mend to is the one to yourself, you gotta start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Exactly
Mhm.
what we're talking about before.
Yeah, the way I think about that is if that's your relationship to yourself, like, looks like that, then you gotta run towards all the things that feel healing to yourself.
Yeah.
You gotta fill up your own cup, like we always say, with the people, practices, experiences, and whatnot that make you feel whole. You gotta pay attention to that. If you aren't sure how to fill your own cup, get curious, pay attention to
Yeah.
what lights you up and who lights you up and what brings you energy, and just keep running towards that.
Absolutely. I love this part, Nora.
Mhm.
I
Thanks.
had a friend where I was kind of estranged from this friend for about 3 years because we had a weird falling out that neither
Mhm.
of us really understood. It's such a strange
Mhm.
thing, but then it gets worse with time. As time goes on, you're more
Yep.
and more reticent to try to patch it because, it's going to be weirder and weirder to do that. But I finally
Right.
got to a point where I miss my friend, and
Mhm.
I don't care what the ramifications of getting in touch again are. If he's still mad at me, then that's the way it is, and fine.
Right.
And we patch things up in the course of a day, man. And now we're back to hanging out again, and it feels the best. So
That's
if you have
awesome.
something that needs to tend and mend like that, I would highly encourage you to go toward it, even though you might think it's going to feel weird, or you might think there might be some residual anger still. Chances are there's not. Chances are your friend is missing you just as much as you're missing them.
Mhm.
But I love this whole thing, and I'm a big believer in giving people their roses while they're still here.
Yeah.
In the last few years, especially since my dad's death. I mean, a
Mhm.
lot of things hinged on that, of course. I've really made a point of telling people that I love them more, and also telling them why.
Yeah.
And as to the self-love thing you were talking about, that had to come from that had to come first for me. As
Mhm.
you say, I had to fill my own cup and then I could pour for others. And the older I get, the more I understand that everything is an inside job. You can't get right with others without getting right with yourself first. And otherwise, it's just an ego thing, man. It's
Yeah.
conditional love. It's love with expectations, reciprocation.
Yeah.
When you love yourself, you can give freely without expectation. And C.S. Lewis said it. He said, "Love is never wasted because its value does not depend on reciprocity." And that's absolutely
Yeah,
true.
that's an awesome quote. It's, true love is not transactional,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so I get that. I love that C.S. Lewis quote.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on, here's the second bullet point
Okay.
that I
Hit
had.
me.
Are there any experiences that you're curious about that seem very compelling that you keep putting off because it's not convenient to your current schedule? I think we're all in that boat, right?
Orgies. No, I'm just kidding.
You do you, Paul.
I'm just kidding. That is not an interest of mine, but it was a funny
But
thing
if
to
it's an
say.
interest of yours, no
Yeah.
judgment.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I would say to make plans towards exploring those experiences, you got to budget for them with your money, with your time, and carve them out in your schedule. Start working towards giving yourself the time and space to experience what you want. And for some of those experiences they come up with, it might feel like a long shot, but it's still worthwhile, in my opinion, to aim the arrow in that direction and
Sure. Yeah.
just start making strides towards it. I think as adults, we often stick to what we're familiar with.
Yeah.
As we get older, we just kind of get into these these grooves,
Deep
these
grooves.
ruts.
Yeah.
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 We need to introduce novelty back into our lives and
Mm-hmm.
and continue growing. And sometimes that could just be even play. Like, how many adults do you know that actually play?
Besides myself, not many.
Exactly. Yeah. So learn new shit, try new shit, just get out there and like engage. Even if your dreams feel out of reach at the moment, just like start making a long-term plan right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You may or may not get there, but hey, it's all about process. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I'd add to this that you can include things that you're scared of in here. I remember I was in Mexico on my own a few years back, and I saw some folks parasailing on the beach, and I'm not great with heights, let's say that. And also, like, extreme sports are not my first port of call when it comes to getting my kicks. Let's just put that out there. But something in me told me to go for it. And before I could talk myself out of it, I went and did it, and it was awesome. And it's just a small thing, really, but I'm still proud of myself for putting my fear aside and trying something new. It was a really funny, it was a funny experience too, because you see the parachute on the beach, right? Big Corona logo on the back or whatever, and you go, oh, that looks like a professional outfit. And you go down there, and it's like two dudes in shorts and their buddy who's on a boat with a janky looking rope tied to it, and then that rope is then tied to you. And you get this janky looking harness that looks about 500,000 people have worn it before you. And you're about to go way high up in the air. And that isn't even the reticence level I was feeling was high at that point. But before I could back out of it, like, the two dudes grabbed me from the side. They each took an arm, and then they each took a leg, and they basically made a hammock out of me. And as the boat took off, they just threw me in the air, and the slack from the rope took off. And they don't prepare you for the ascent, right? The ascent is so fast. Like, getting up there is like, whoop, the fastest high-speed elevator you've ever been on. But then once you're up there, it's really peaceful, and getting down is a nice float down as well. But I didn't know I was going to be thrown in the air, and I didn't know that that the ascent was going to be so sickeningly fast. But
I would say that if you did know that, you probably never would have done.
Yeah,
that,
I probably wouldn't have. I probably wouldn't. I mean, by the time they were cradling me in their giant arms, I was committed. I was committed to the project. So
that's amazing.
Sorry, I did not. Just
no
an aside there.
I love
Just
that.
an aside. Yeah,
that's great. Some of the more meaningful experiences that I've had, there's quite a few in more recent years, just because it's I've shifted a lot of my focus on integrating eulogy living into my life.
Yeah,
and I went on a multi-day through hike in the highlands of Iceland, which, if you know me, I don't shut up about Iceland because I love Iceland.
I know you love Iceland.
Yes, but it's like,
and hiking, oddly, I'll never understand that.
I used to always used to make fun of people for camping and doing all that stuff because I was like, why do you want to just like sleep outside in a tent when you can have a bed, But I've turned a corner, especially with my husband from the Midwest who grew up camping. So
of course,
it's all about getting the good, proper gear, which I know is an investment, and some people really can't afford that. I get that, but you got to have the good gear, man, to be comfortable.
There you go.
Anyway, we there was a part in the highlands of Iceland where we were on this one trail called the Fimmvörðuháls Trail, and part of the trail, there's two really like challenging sections. One is called Cat Spine, where you're literally walking on the ridge with like two huge drops down. It's like this tiny ridge at the top that you're like balancing on.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good.
Well, that wasn't even the scary one. There's another part called Hell's Ridge, and you're on the side of a mountain with like crumbling trail. Like, you could literally fall to your death with like this janky chain that's like half pulled out of the side of the mountain.
Love it.
I actually had like a nervous breakdown once I crossed that because it was like pretty terrifying. But I had a really great guide who was also a friend of mine, and he got me through it. And so it was amazing because we got through that and hiked to the top of two new volcanoes that are like that formed because Iceland is crazy like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've hiked up to see erupting volcanoes there in the middle of the night, which is way out of my comfort zone.
That sounds amazing, though. Yeah,
it really was. Like, it was like a spiritual moment. It was really super powerful. And like I went to the Azores a few years ago, and they have like this whole thing where they have these marine biologists that like take you out to sea, and they have people on the land that look out with binoculars. So there's no sonar to disrupt the marine life. And they found this giant pod of dolphins who were like jumping out of the water, like right next to us while we were like going out to sea. And then they're like, okay, jump in. You jump in, and it's just like you're in the water. There is just pods of dolphins swimming all around you, which is really crazy and cool. And then like the ocean is like blue, and then it goes cerulean, and then it just is like black underneath.
Yeah.
You're like, and all I can think is like, what the hell? Like, get me out of here now.
Yeah,
but it was incredible. You know, they were like really incredible experiences that I had dreamed about, and I planned for, and I budgeted for, and I like made trips around them to do that. And they've been really meaningful. So anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You're always safe with dolphins around. Dolphins around in the water, you're pretty safe.
That's such white girl of me.
It is like 3 white girl vacations though, you know, right there. It's like white middle-aged lady tourism right there. Like, I went to Iceland and got a volcano, and then I saw dolphins. And then I got a colonic down at the right. It's like, no, it's okay. We all know you're not that, Nora. It's okay.
Well, I am a white girl, but
but you're from Philly, so it's all right. It's okay. We both grew up working class. We understand how it is.
Much, yes. Right. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll move on to the next one. Yeah. I would say that like I don't have children of my own, but I have a niece and a nephew who I adore.
Yeah.
They're great. And I think about how quickly they're growing quite often. And so if you're a parent and you're listening to this, I'm sure this is going to deeply resonate. But are there any experiences that you want to provide for your children before they grow out of them? Right. And as they say, the days are long, but the years are short. Right. And if you want to experience certain things with your kids, whether that's traveling with them, introducing them to elder family who are still around, or like teaching them how to ride a bike like my dad did. That's a great memory I have. Or building stuff with them, whatever it is, just dive in now, because the window to do those things, it's a narrow one. So don't put off doing those things with your kids, because they're going to age out of them real quick.
True. I mean, you're not going to be their world forever. You have a tiny window to share with your kids before they develop their own social lives that don't include you anymore, you know? So do it now. And like my dad, I had a lot of great experiences with my dad. I was thinking the other day when we were talking about this, there was one trip we took to the Grand Tetons. We took a lot of driving trips because we couldn't afford to fly anywhere when I was a kid. And never bothered me though, because we always went into the most amazing scenery, and like I never wanted to go anywhere else. It was just great being with my parents, sitting in the middle of the bench seat in the pickup truck, and dad pulling over every 5 minutes to fish in some puddle, you know, and mom collecting rocks illegally to bring back to the garden or whatever. But we went to the Tetons one year, and I remember, I don't know why mom didn't go, but dad and I just went on this dawn boat ride out to an island in the middle of the lake. And out there they were cooking trout over an open fire, and there was eggs and coffee, and, you know, it was a real like cowboy breakfast type of thing out there. And we had just had a whale of a time, man. I remember we just had the best chat, and I felt closer to my dad than I ever did before during that thing. And it was just one of those things he just decided to do. He's like, I want to go on this. We're going to go on this dawn boat ride thing. And it just turned out to be lovely. And I ended up working for it. That was about when I was 12. When I was 14, I ended up working a summer for him too. So we got all this time commuting from Oakland to San Francisco and back again at the end of the day, where we could just chat about ourselves and about, you know, he told me stories about his life that I had never heard before. And all those times were really special, and they weren't expensive, and they weren't, overly planned out. You know, I think a lot of people plan out this elaborate stuff to do with their kids, and really the stuff that I remember. And, you know, we did do some of that stuff. We went to Hawaii a couple times later and things like that. But the times I really remember, it was just about feeling more intimacy with my parents, you know, in one way or another. It's connection. It's just connection. And that doesn't require that you spend a lot of money or be in a certain place. And it's just lovely. So make sure you get those moments, man, because I'm 56 and I still remember that boat ride like it was yesterday. Absolutely. So it just lasts. And, you know, being a high school teacher too, that's another thing, is that you will have kids come up to you years and years and years later and say, do you remember when you told me this? And I will be like, no, I was probably like not enough caffeine. And I don't know, you know, and it's like, well, I followed that wisdom for all my whole life. I'm like, oh God, please. No, what is the wisdom? Please. I don't understand, you know, but words matter, and proximity energy matters, proximity matters, like all those things matter. And so you never know what you're going to say that's going to stick with somebody, and it's going to be a North Star for them for the rest of their life, probably. And that's absolutely what that trip with my dad was.
Like my family, we grew up, you know, like working class, middle class, you know, and my parents didn't have the money or the patience to take 3 kids on a plane.
I get that.
So like my whole world was like the Philadelphia area. Once in a blue moon, New York City. And the Jersey Shore. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe Delaware Park to watch the horse racing, which is really nice. That would learn how to bet on them.
Yeah.
A little window into my childhood.
And all the bars your dad took you to. Don't forget that.
Bars.
Yeah,
like
the bar
I said,
scene.
If you want to know my childhood, go watch the movie St. Vincent with Bill Murray. It's like watching me grow up.
Yeah.
But no, but we would drive to the Jersey Shore because that's like, in this area, that's a huge vacation point for people because and has for generations, right? And so it's like generations deep of families going there, and even if it's just a day trip, but we would go to the Jersey Shore for like a week, rent a house there when it was like way more affordable than it is now. And my grandparents would put aside money to like get a house for like a month, and they would invite each week like different family, like aunts and uncles and cousins to stay. So it was like a great way. And there would be so many summers where my brothers and I and my parents would just be on the beach all day, just playing outside. You couldn't get me out of the ocean, and running around collecting shells, hitting the boardwalk. And it was great because I just think of, my parents worked so much. And it was one of the few times that we were together, including with like my extended family in like a giant group on the beach, just of everyone like playing wiffle ball and like
relaxed, everybody relaxing together without the normal daily pressures. Yeah.
It was like one of my, and I loved it because my dad was relaxed and my mom was relaxed, and they were laughing and smiling, and it was just, there were no screens in front of our face. We were outside all day. We were exploring nature, and looking for dolphins and all that stuff. And I cherish those memories so much. They're such core childhood memories, so much that when my dad passed away, I had this, I don't know why I did, but I had this inclination to cut some of his hair. And I buried some of his hair on a beach in Ocean City, New Jersey, because it was like one of my favorite places to be with him, as a kid. So just felt like, I know you love being here, Dad, so I'm going to leave some of your hair here.
Yeah, man. Anyway. It's aren't we lucky to have had, aren't we lucky and privileged to have had both of our parents, and B, experiences like that, because a lot of people don't ever get to have that.
I think about that all the time now at this age. And I the great thing is, last year my nephew came into town in the summer, and I took him to the Jersey Shore for a day, and he lives in Wisconsin, so he doesn't really have beach. They have lake culture, but it's not beach culture.
Not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same, but it's similar, but it's not the same. And my brother-in-law was with us, and we drove there, and I don't think he really knew like what the Jersey Shore really is like outside of the TV show. But I think he thought we were just gonna like pull up to some like beach with no one on it, and be like, okay, let's go. And when we like crossed over the bridge that like looks over all the chain islands, he was like, whoa.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was awesome because my nephew was 9 at the time, and like he hit the beach, and it was like his brain just like went short circuited with like delight.
Yeah.
And I was like trying to grab him and be like, hey, listen, before you go into the water, I have some things to teach you about the ocean. Don't turn your back on. And he couldn't even wait for me to finish the sentence. He just like ran straight in the water. And it was great too, because I could see my brother. It was the exact same thing that my parents, where my brother-in-law and Kevin and I were just sitting there building sandcastles with him, and like just him being delighted and everyone relaxed. It was great. So I really cherish that. Like I'm continuing that legacy, with my nephew and also my niece. So
give that to your kids, man. All right, let's move on to the next one here, shall we?
Okay. So the next bullet I have is imagine that you're attending your own funeral, and you have to get up in front of the congregation to summarize your own life.
Sounds stressful.
Right.
But you're dead, so
everyone. Yeah, exactly. Who cares? What are the ideal accomplishments or experiences, relationships, and ways of living you'd be most proud to communicate to that congregation? Like, what do you want them to know that you learned, and how do you hope that those people, like, how do you hope they felt about you? How did you make them feel while you had time with them? Were you present? Were you kind? Were you forgiving? Were you generous with your time and your heart? And like, just, I would say, set a timer for 20 minutes and just hot pen what comes up for you. And
hot pen. I like that.
Hot pants.
Not hot pants. Hot pen.
Yeah, not hot damn, but hot pen. Hot pen. That just like write without editing, without like, just write what comes up, and you don't have to think about, like, just write what comes up. And then share that with the people you love and you trust. And I think that writing your own eulogy can make the path you're on a lot clearer.
Agree. There's a little note of caution I want to add to this exercise, though, and that's that this exercise can easily turn into another goal-oriented, achievement-based project that gets you right back in a form of resume living. Only in this case, it's your like spiritual resume or your being resume, your human resume. It's not the point of the exercise. The point is to assess your life and begin to move toward the things that you will give you the freedom to step into your truest self, and to sidestep your conditioning and your egoic need to be recognized. And the exercise is less about what you want people to say about you or feel about you and more about how you want to feel in yourself. And it should really act as a mirror and not a projector, right? This is a time for reflection, not projection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like the way I would put it is make it more like a diary than it is an Instagram reel. You're aiming for authenticity, not a performance, and so like it's a great point, Paul. So thank you for bringing that up.
Not a problem.
I'll move on to the next point.
Okay.
The next bullet point I have is imagine that you're Ebenezer Scrooge and the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future show up to show you where you were, where you are now in relation to everyone and everything. And also the trajectory that your life is on. Are you okay with what you see? Like, what changes do you need to make in order to feel confident that you're living a life that you're proud of, that's authentic? And what people or resources can you reach out for help along the way?
Yeah.
I think that'd be worthwhile to think about.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's useful to remember here that Scrooge, since you bring up Scrooge, is visited in his dreams by these visions, then awakens to a different reality than he went to sleep in, right? He's a changed man when he gets up. So what happened there? Did he change who he was by adding things into his personality, or did he simply realize that the path that he was on, that he saw in these visitations, was no longer serving him, and so he was free to shed them? I think a lot of us get confused when we begin a spiritual journey and think that we need to add things to our lives that'll make us more enlightened or whatever, quote unquote. Meditation, yoga, bumper stickers, statues, zafus, whatever. We mistake the ritual for the freedom we're seeking. And we try to reach nirvana or heaven or whatever you want to call it by doing or adding more stuff to our lives when subtraction is actually what's necessary. So letting the things that don't serve us go, like our conditioning, our guilt, our shame, and our trauma that I talked about before. If we're still attached to these things and believe they're real, then no matter how much prayer or meditation or spiritual doodads or mantras or yoga we add, we'll still end up, in the same place that we started, which is suffering. So to me, the whole thing is about releasing, subtracting, and getting to the essential. So I always look for what I can give up before I ask what needs to be added to my life. I think it helps me to think of myself as a statue that is yet to be carved, right? The real me is inside this hunk of marble, and the real work is to remove all the unnecessary stone to reveal myself.
Right.
So it's that kind of thing. It's a subtractive art, not an additive art.
Yeah, those are great points. I have a general rule that if I bring something into my household that's new, that I have to, donate or get rid of something that's old, that's no longer serving me. So that's a great point. I find the culling is usually more of what makes like a life easier and happier.
Yeah, and the culling, I say this kind of culling is even a little bit more extreme in that you don't add anything and then take anything away. It's all about getting rid of things until you get to the essential, just only what's essential left. And that's a hard thing to do, and I haven't done it. I mean, I'm not saying that I got there. I'm not there. It's hard. Yeah,
I had this reminds me, like, speaking of really worthwhile experiences, you have Eulogy living. A good friend of mine a few years back, she booked us a 5-day backcountry yoga retreat. It was like a retreat with her yoga studio in the backcountry of Yosemite.
Yeah.
And we had a guide, and it was like a group of women. I forget, there was probably 15 of us. We hiked 9 miles into the backcountry, into this incredible place in Yosemite that no one is there. There are bears, there's a bear and rivers and amazing views. But to go back there, you just bring the essentials. And when you get there, the guide is like, all right, everyone lay all your stuff out that you're bringing into the backcountry before we get on the trail. And we laid all our stuff out from our backpacks, and she's like, all right, I'm going to go through. And for each of us, she took even more of our essentials out. It was you have 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of underwear, 2 tank tops, a pair of shorts. And then you're carrying a bear thing, and you don't even have like shampoo or like.
Wait, what's a bear thing? What is that?
Like the when I talk about like you put your food in the bear.
Oh, I see, like a bear container or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
For your food. Gotcha.
I don't know why I kept blanking on that.
Nobody knows what a bear thing is, Nora.
I know.
Clarify that.
Here's the thing: it was like you have your toothbrush. You don't even have soap because like the soap will get into the water systems and like it's not good for. So you're like. And like the entire, like there were 5 or 6 days you're hiking every day and like you're sitting, but you're sitting on the ground. Right. It's not comfortable. You're you're in like, in your tent. Sometimes it's cold. It's definitely out of my comfort zone, and I wasn't always comfortable, but I came out of that experience changed, and it was so fulfilling, and I felt whole because there were no screens. There was no internet connection. It was only the community that you were with in the woods.
Yeah.
Like, and cooking together and hiking together and doing everything together. It was just like getting back to that like primitive human thing that we all miss out on. And so I agree, like we didn't have a lot. You didn't need a lot. But we had the best time. It was such an amazing experience.
There's certainly something to be said for getting back to just essentials like that. And
100%.
certainly something for retreats as well. If you've never been on a retreat before, I've been to a lot of dance and music camps, and I used to teach a lot of dance and music camps, and they're all retreats in one way or another. But especially like, I always think of Ashoka in upstate New York, which is a really special camp to me, and we kept doing, we never even got paid that much for doing it. We just kept doing it because it was so pleasurable to do it. I mean, it's a lovely group of people. You're in the middle of the woods. Really, there's no internet connection, and there's no Wi-Fi, and there's barely cell phone service at the top of the hill. So while people have their screens and stuff around, they're basically unusable anyway. And everybody pays way more attention to their instruments and playing together and singing together and, square dancing and swing dancing together at night, like all this stuff. It's a real
connection,
a real connection and a real respite from, this insanely quick world that we live in these
hyper
days.
consuming.
Yeah. So I recommend like retreats, meditation retreats, yoga retreats, dance
or even
retreats,
like
whatever it is.
Those guided hikes and stuff, like I find myself like craving like getting off the grid again because it's just like there's something really fulfilling about that to me.
And there is something, as we know from doing EMDR, about walking. That's another binaural stimulation type of, bilateral, not binaural. Binaural is ears, but bilateral stimulation that, you are in a different headspace when you're walking. You process differently, you think differently. And so if you're just in your own stew these days, one thing you can do is just go for a walk. If you don't walk a lot, I walk all the time, and I do a lot of my figuring stuff out while I'm on a walk. That's
same. I was going to say that like we often get overwhelmed by the trajectory that our lives are on, right? Like it feels like, you're holding on tight, and it's like, the runaway train in some ways. And I think the beauty is that we always we hold the power to change that trajectory. Like it might feel really difficult or almost impossible to do that without like disrupting your life, but we still have that. We hold that power. And in order to change the trajectory, you have to get clarity in identifying the type of life that you'd like to live. And that's changing constantly for me. Like the type of life I wanted to live in my 20s is different than I want to live now. And I've changed.
For sure.
Thank God.
Thank God.
Some of us are on the path that we're supposed to be on. Some of us need clarity, and some of us just are lost in the weeds. But like if you're gentle with yourself, and if you don't have any idea of what you want for your life, or if it seems impossible to get to where you want to be, you can make enormous changes for the better, but it involves courage, and involves having a vision. It involves collaboration with other people, and some good fortune sometimes. But the pursuit, like we said, the process of it, of truly being happiness, is definitely worth it, because especially if you try to enjoy that process, like, and savor it. We all have that power, whether we acknowledge it or not.
Absolutely. The process to me is everything. I mean, I've always said that too, because I've been an artist forever, right? But process, if success and failure are momentary, the rest is just all the rest of your life is process. So if you aren't enjoying the process, you aren't enjoying the better part of your life. And that sucks, right? So you have to figure out, is it the process? Is it you? What is it? But you got to get to a point where you can enjoy that process. You can, that's what the process is, where the juice is for you. And then you're much happier as you go along, if instead of just working for, ticking a box for a goal. And, I agree with your statement about being gentle with yourself as well. When we're in a part of our lives where we're not satisfied, we can make panicky decisions and that only make things worse, because it's more uncomfortable for us to sit with our thoughts and try to detach from them, like in meditation, than it is to take an action, even a poorly thought out one a lot of the time, right? That's just our default mode. Like, we don't really want to face our own shit. So, we'll do anything to get out of that. So try to get quiet and watch your thoughts. And it's hard. And notice when you attach to them, and then just try to release, and be kind to yourself, because this stuff is hard. And like we've been saying the whole podcast, it takes courage and it can feel lonely at times. I mean, this is a gutsy thing you're doing, and it's ultimately a walk you have to take by yourself. And that can feel super lonely. I think a lot of people who start their spiritual journey are like, God, this is so lonely. Like, what am I getting out of this? And it just takes time. And then there'll be a moment where you're going to break through, where it's not so lonely anymore. And you realize that all of these things that you've been hoping to integrate in your life are slowly coming to you. They're all coming in, and that takes a lot of that loneliness out of it. And you don't need so much courage anymore as when you start,
Yeah, you really just, you touched on something that I want to say, that like when I was, again, going through chemo.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
You don't have to say that.
No, but this is, I kept hearing, like, at these different talks when there were other survivors who were like years out of their diagnoses, talking to us who were like fresh in it.
Yeah.
And nearly all of them said that, like, survivorhood is the hardest part. And I was like, what? Like this, because what we're going through right now is really fucking difficult.
Yeah, hard. Yeah.
But I'll say, being on this side of the fence, it's the truth in that is it's exactly what you're talking about. It can feel really isolating and lonely when you have an awakening like that, where your death is so up in front of your face and real, like realer than I've ever known it.
Sure.
That it's like it changed me. It changed the trajectory of my life. It made me really contemplate, like, what am I doing with this time? If I had a recurrence and I only had 5 years left, what do I want to be doing right now? Because that is a reality for people who who have been diagnosed or have gone through something that is could easily come back, or face their mortality in really weird or real ways. But exactly like that, it can feel isolating and lonely, because when you look around and you see everyone's kind of in the what we call the rat race.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is insanity. Like, how do we get off this?
Yeah.
A lot of people are just like, they don't know what you're going through. They don't know what you're talking about. So, but there are
not at all. And
people
sometimes they'll actively refute what you're going
exactly
through. That's the other thing. You encounter resistance because you're working on yourself, and that's a really hard place to be, because you're already having a hard time working on yourself.
But it's also,
and then some of your friends are like, nah, I don't get it.
Yeah, but it's also like it's your personal truth is now different than their personal truth.
Theirs. Yeah, that's just the
and
fact
that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But you have to follow your personal truth.
Yeah, and you can find community in that too. There's plenty of people who are on the same path. You just don't know them currently. So just know that there's a lot of, even some Facebook groups aren't terrible at help at relating to other people who are on the same path as you. But all right, we've said a lot here, Nora. So let's bring it in for our famous 3-point landing.
All right,
famously concise
3-point landing right here. Here we go. So
Number
the first
one
is, use the fact that one day you'll die as an anchor and motivation to explore the type of life you intentionally want to live.
I like your stress on that one. Use the fact that one day you will die. It didn't get scary till then. Now it's scary again. I don't like it.
Pushing daisies, man.
I don't like it. All right. Number 2, get curious and pay attention to who and what lights you up. Carve out time to explore those people and those ideas. Yes. Really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last of the 3-point landing is, remember that fulfillment often comes to us by stripping away the excess instead of adding on more things.
Yep.
Start culling what no longer serves you.
Absolutely. This makes me. I'm going to go write my own eulogy this afternoon, I think, because this has made me think. Maybe I should do that as an exercise. I like that. All right. So even though I think a lot of these qualities are coming along anyway, but I try to do everything that we talk about on the podcast, because honestly, I learn stuff from you all the time, Nora. It's great.
Same.
I love it.
Also, Paul, I'm going to give you your flowers.
Okay.
I love you. I love you.
Oh, I love you too.
Beat you to it. No, you're just a stand-up dude, and you're genuine, and you always have been, and you're you're just an amazing man. So I'm really grateful you're here in this world.
Oh man, I'm so grateful for you too. I wouldn't want to be doing this podcast with anybody else in my life. And I'm serious when I say that I learn so much from you every time we talk, not just on the podcast, but just when we talk. And I think you're an incredible human being, Nora. So thanks for being my friend. I love you too.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything you've heard on the show, please feel free to drop us an email at ifweonlyknewthenpod@gmail.com.